While Kermit's in Washington, D.C., he's been able to spend some time with Senator Roy Blunt. We'll check in with him now to find out more about his interview with him and a tour of Harry S. Truman's old office.
Megan, the sun's beginning to set here on the Mall in Washington, and if you listen carefully, you can hear an ice cream truck in the background serving the needs of the joggers on this mall. As you mentioned, we did talk to Senator Roy Blunt earlier, and we looked around his office. His office once belonged to a man named Harry Truman. Harry Truman was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1935. He served there 10 years until being elected vice president, in which time he served only 48 days until Roosevelt died and he became president. But he worked both his Senate years and those 48 days out of the same office, this office in the Russell Senate Office Building, one of the buildings surrounding the Capitol. It took Kit Bond half his career, I'm told, to get into this office. Roy Blunt says he got in it right away, and it's an attraction to anybody who comes to visit him. We enjoyed it as well. Reporting live from the Mall in Washington, D.C., Kermit Miller, KRCG 13.
All right, thanks, Kermit. Congress has failed to pass the Farm Bill, and that will affect thousands of Missourians. We have team coverage tonight. KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist looks at the effect on mid-Missourians who will get food aid. And Kermit Miller is talking with lawmakers. He's live in Alexandria, Virginia. That's where we start tonight.
Megan, we are coming to you from Alexandria, the Old Town section just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. That Farm Bill is 700 pages. It spends $867 billion on everything from nutrition and conservation programs to crop price subsidies and insurance, two things very big in Missouri. It generally passes with bipartisan support, but not on Friday, and none of those things I just listed are the reason why. As Missouri Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer explains it, there is a battle between conservative and moderate Republicans on how to deal with immigration.
In a nutshell, that's what's going on. It's inter-party conflict based on immigration reform that, while it is a priority of the president and a priority of this conference to do that, is a very divisive issue, and at this point we don't have unanimity on any particular bill.
So farmers are being held hostage until the House resolves the immigration impasse. A couple of key issues in the Farm Bill this year are issues that had the attention of Missouri state lawmakers. They include new work requirements for people getting nutrition assistance and rural access to broadband internet.
This year our #1 priority really was to make sure that the ability for internet providers to bring broadband service to people out in rural areas was not going to be held up by lawsuits.
The Farm Bill provides $600 million for broadband access. So what is the prognosis? Luetkemeyer says there is a process to bring back the House bill. Missouri Senator Roy Blunt is also confident.
We will have a Farm Bill. I was talking to Chairman Roberts, the Senate chairman, over the weekend. He is confident, as I am, that we'll get somewhere. We'd like to do that sooner rather than later. The Farm Bill it lasts for a while longer, but the quicker we can get that done, the better off we all are.
Tomorrow, we are scheduled to talk to Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler and Senator Claire McCaskill. We want to focus tomorrow on defense spending. They're beginning to mark up the defense bill. We are also going to have some access to the White House, and we hope to be broadcasting from there tomorrow night. Reporting live from Alexandria, Virginia, Kermit Miller, KRCG 13. Megan?
All right, thanks, Kermit. Kermit also got a look at Senator Blunt's office. It was also the office of Harry S. Truman when he was serving in the Senate. Truman was elected in 1935, and he served for 10 years and spent that decade in this office in the Russell Senate Office Building. We will be at the White House tomorrow for President Trump's meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Plus, Kermit Miller will speak with lawmakers on a wide range of other topics. We'll have a live blog and the latest developments on air and online at krcgtv.com. Food security advocates say the stalled Farm Bill could harm thousands of Missouri food stamp users. We continue our team coverage with KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist. He joins us in the studio to tell us how.
Megan, right now the Farm Bill includes a work requirement for able-bodied adults who use the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. Republican leaders say this will encourage people to find a job, and this would reduce the need for food stamps. But Missouri social welfare groups say many program users work odd hours or are self-employed. That makes it harder to prove they're employed. They say a better idea would be to target outreach to those who are truly chronically unemployed.
That would be a much more surgical strike, so to speak, of catching the number of people that you're trying to catch that are chronically unemployed, finding out why and dealing with that situation instead of creating a massive work hour tracking bureaucracy.
The Congressional Budget Office says 1 to 2 million people could lose their benefits by the year 2028. It would save $1.5 billion. You can find the CBO's report on our website, krcgtv.com. I've included a link to it in the article for this story.
And here's a look at the White House right now. We had our eyes in the press briefing room today. Sarah Huckabee Sanders addressed KRCG 13's Kermit Miller and a slew of reporters on a variety of topics. The press briefing followed a big meeting today between Trump and the president of South Korea. KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist talks to a foreign policy expert in Colombia in just a moment. But we begin right now with KRCG 13's Kermit Miller. He joins us live today in Washington, D.C. to tell us about where the U.S. stands following that meeting.
Megan, welcome to the White House press briefing room. It is pouring rain outside, so we are inside. As you indicated, President Trump and President Moon Jae-in fighting to save this summit planned for Singapore in June between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. The South Koreans saying 99.9% certainty that it will happen. The president, though, saying about 50-50 at this point, and there could be some delay. North Korea is not ruling out the possibility of just scrapping the meeting altogether. They are objecting to joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea. President Trump says he believes that North Korea's attitude toward a meeting changed after Kim Jong-un met with China's president for a second time earlier this month.
The first time everybody knew about, the second time it was like a surprise. And I think things changed after that meeting, so I can't say that I'm happy about it.
Now, the U.S. plans to keep all U.S. economic and military pressure on Pyongyang. Just today, the USS Milius, an advanced guided missile destroyer, arrived in Japan to protect against any ballistic missile attacks by North Korea. President Trump has said that he is willing to give Kim Jong-un assurances that the U.S. will not overthrow his government if he agrees to a deal on denuclearization. Megan?
Now, Kermit, it was a big day at the White House, but we understand it's also been a pretty big day for you, too.
Yeah, Megan, we had a rather unique opportunity here today. The president likes to meet from time to time with reporters from outside the Beltway, regional reporters who report to local markets. And he had one of those today. There were 10 reporters in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump. I was fortunate enough to be one of them, and we will tell you a bit more about that experience coming up tonight, coming up a little later in this newscast. Megan?
All right, we look forward to it. Thanks, Kermit. We continue our team coverage with KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist. He joins us in the studio to tell us why experts say don't expect much if President Trump meets with North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un.
Megan, Columbia College professor Brian Kessel specializes in international relations. He says North Korea tends to alternate between threats and negotiation. He says anything to de-escalate the rhetoric between Trump and Kim is helpful, but Kim's regime could treat this as simply a PR move.
The whole concept of denuclearization doesn't seem to have been clearly defined for both sides yet. So definitely that kind of groundwork needs to be laid in advance in order for something really productive to come out of this meeting.
Kessel says the summit most likely would get the ball rolling for future high-level talks. Coming up at 6, I asked Kessel what this means for mid-Missouri's security and for its farmers.
All right, thanks, Garrett. For our question of the day, we want to know, how confident are you that President Trump will meet with Kim Jong-un? You can answer right now by going to krcgtv.com/question. Our coverage from Washington, D.C. continues at 6 and 10 tonight. Kermit Miller speaks one-on-one with Senator Claire McCaskill and Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler. He's tracking how a defense budget could impact Missourians. Hear how they say Fort Leonard Wood and Whiteman Air Force Base could be impacted by the debate in Congress. We'll have a live blog and the latest developments on air and online at krcgtv.com. We've been covering Washington, D.C. for the last 2 days regarding legislation that impacts Missourians. KRCG 13's Kermit Miller joins us live from there to tell us about the experience of sitting in the press briefing and actually meeting the president.
Yeah, Megan, we were in on the press briefing this afternoon, which was mostly about North Korea. And then a group of 10 people representing some major ownership groups and some regional broadcast markets, including KRCG in Jefferson City, were invited into the Oval Office to sit down with President Donald Trump. The meeting was off the record, so I cannot tell you what he said. They also took away my cell phone, so I don't have any photos, but the White House photographer took some pictures, and we'll get those at some point down the road. When it was over, I asked Kellyanne Conway what the mission of having us in that room was, and we will hear what she told me coming up tonight at 6. Megan?
Very exciting. Thanks, Kermit. Good evening. President Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in met today ahead of a possible meeting with North Korea. We have team coverage today. KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist spoke to a political science professor about how the outcome of the meeting could affect us right here in mid-Missouri. And Kermit Miller joins us live in the nation's capital. We start there.
Yeah, Megan, President Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in hoping to save this North Korean summit in Singapore next month. The South Koreans say 99.9% certainty it will happen. The president, though, saying about 50-50 at this point, and it could be delayed. North Korea is not ruling out the possibility of canceling altogether. President Kim Jong-un has objections to the recent joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea. President Trump says even if the meeting does get delayed, that doesn't mean it won't happen.
So there's a very substantial chance that it won't work out, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it won't work out over a period of time, but it may not work out for June 12th. But there's a good chance that we'll have the meeting.
The White House keeping up the economic and political pressure on Pyongyang today. An advanced missile carrier destroyer arrived in Japan to protect against any ballistic missile attacks in North Korea. It's a situation we will watch. Defense very much on the minds of Congress here this week. The Senate and House both beginning to mark up the defense reauthorization legislation. We have talked to Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill and Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler about that, and we will have that for you tonight at 10. Megan?
All right. Senator Claire McCaskill also met with MU System President Moon Choi today. McCaskill's team says they talked about funding for medical research and innovation in Missouri. They also discussed support for a research space for the Harry S. Truman Memorial Veterans Hospital to focus on treatment and disease prevention. While a U.S.-North Korea summit hangs in the balance, we want to know what this means for us in mid-Missouri. KRCG 13's Garrett Berquist joins us in the studio to tell us the implications here.
Megan, Columbia College professor Brian Kessel says this goes beyond North Korea's rudimentary nuclear capability. He says any negotiation with the U.S. should address third-party access to North Korea's nuclear materials. Kessel also says North Korea has proven itself to be a cyber threat. Now, I also asked if North Korea could become a market for Missouri agricultural products. Kessel says don't count on it.
Well, North Korea, suffered from famine in the 1990s and definitely cannot produce enough food to sustain itself. Of course, North Korea is also a very poor country and doesn't have a lot of resources. So their ability to buy a whole lot on the international market probably isn't great at this point.
Coming up tonight at 10, Kessel explains how the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal might affect negotiations with North Korea.
All right, thanks, Garrett. And as you've seen, we have a team in Washington, D.C. Kermit talked with Senator Claire McCaskill and Representative Vicky Hartzler. We'll hear from them tonight at 10. We have a live blog and the latest developments on air and online at KRCGTV.com. For the past 2 days, Kermit Miller has been in the nation's capital speaking with lawmakers about the important issues. Today, he met with President Donald Trump. Kermit, tell us all the details about your meeting.
Well, Megan, we got here in time for the afternoon press briefing with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and when that was over, a group of 10 regional and local reporters and anchors and broadcast ownership people went into another area and waited to be taken into the Oval Office, where we met with President Donald Trump. He came in, greeted all of us, sat down, and spent about 30 minutes talking about a variety of things that I can't really tell you about, because there was an agreement in advance that this would be an off-the-record get-together. I can tell you that he discussed matters of national and international importance, as well as matters of regional importance. We spent, again, about a half an hour. We stood up, shook his hand again, and left. At one point, Vice President Mike Pence did come into the room and said hello. And I was pretty much focused on the president and what he was saying, but at another point, I glanced to my right and realized that Kellyanne Conway had sat down next to me. Now, we didn't speak to one another in that room, but when it was all over and we came back into the press briefing room, I asked Kellyanne Conway what this is about. Why does the president have us come in there and sit down and listen to him? And here's what she had to say.
Well, the president enjoys speaking to regional reporters, and he recognizes it's a big country out there. He went and traveled to most of it, if not all of it, when he successfully ran for president. And so he appreciated you taking the time to come to the White House and be his guest to talk a little bit about the issues of the day.
So we are done here for tonight, and we will be heading back to our hotel momentarily. Again, this was an off-the-record meeting. I wish I could tell you some of the things he said. They took away our cell phones before we went into the room, so we have no photos to show you. However, a White House photographer did come into the room, and we are told we will have access to those pictures later, and we'll share those with the folks in the TV13 audience. So that pretty much wraps it up from here, Megan. We will again be back tonight at 10, and we will be talking about the defense reauthorization process with two members of Missouri's congressional delegation, Claire McCaskill and Vicky Hartzler, both of whom sit on military committees in their respective chambers. Right now, we'll send it back to you, Megan.
All right, thanks, Kermit. An exciting day, an interesting one. Good evening. I'm Megan Lane. President Donald Trump today met with the president of South Korea. It's an effort to save an upcoming summit with North Korea. President Trump did suggest a potential delay in the summit. That delay could come after North Korean President Kim Jong-un objected to recent joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea. The North Korea situation puts a spotlight on U.S. defense capabilities. Both houses of Congress this week are marking up the defense reauthorization legislation. In Washington, KRCG 13's Kermit Miller talked to Senator Claire McCaskill and Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler about that. He reports tonight live from Alexandria, Virginia.
Good evening, Megan. A light rain falling in Alexandria this evening. We are undercover here. As you indicated, that was a situation here where both McCaskill and Hartzler are interested. They serve on their armed services committees in their respective chambers. Claire McCaskill says the defense reauthorization bill does not appropriate money. It sets policy.
It provides the authorization for later appropriations for weapon systems, for military pay, for policies that, for example, most of the reforms that we did in the Uniform Code of Military Justice around the problem of sexual assault in the military was done through the NDAA. And so that's what we're doing this week. We're marking that up.
Hartzler says Whiteman Air Force Base and Fort Leonard Wood are in good shape.
We're going to have additional troops added to the Army in strength, which will go through Fort Leonard Wood for their basic training. We are providing for the modernization of the B-2s at Whiteman, while at the same time supporting the B-21 Raider program, which will be the next stealth bomber that eventually will replace the B-2. So there's a lot of positive developments for Whiteman Air Force Base as well as Fort Leonard Wood.
So tomorrow morning we will hear from McCaskill and Hartzler as they talk about this situation in North Korea and what they would expect going forward there. If you were with us at 5 and 6, you know we had some special access at the White House today. We were in the White House press briefing with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, most of which was devoted to the North Korea situation, and we were in the Oval Office for about 30 minutes with a group of people. We were invited to participate in a sit-down with the President of the United States. Mr. Trump came in, greeted us all, and talked to us for about 30 minutes. Now, this was an off-the-record conversation, so I can't really tell you specifically what he talked to us about. I will tell you that it was a discussion of matters of interest to him, matters of international and national importance, as well as some regional and local importance, responding to questions from the reporters in that room. It was an invitation from the White House to participate, and we took advantage of it. I will have more reflection on what that experience was like tomorrow morning on KRCG 13 Live at sunrise during the 6 a.m. hour, and again tomorrow night on KRCG 13 Live at 10. For right now, reporting live in Alexandria, Virginia, Kermit Miller, KRCG 13.
All right, thanks, Kermit. And his visit to the White House coincided with the visit by South Korean President Moon Jae-in.
Well, Kermit Miller has been reporting from Washington this week, where among his assignments was an Oval Office meeting with President Donald Trump.
Afterward, he discussed that meeting with KRCG 13's operations manager, Ricardo Montgomery.
Kermit, how did we get here?
That's a good question. This thing came together really, really fast. We learned about it on Friday. By Saturday, we were in a car driving 14 hours to Washington, D.C., got in Sunday evening, and decided to do some work before we went to the White House that involved interviews with 4 members of the Missouri congressional delegation in 2 days. That's a trick in Washington because distances are great and parking on the street is almost non-existent. So you find yourself working hard to get from place to place on the time that you need to get there. Then we end up at the White House. We had access to the press briefing room. We had access to the Oval Office. And we were here for the White House press briefing by Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the day that President Moon of South Korea had met with President Trump. That was the focus of the briefing. We were part of that briefing. And then I went into the Oval Office with a group of people.
How was the experience being in the Oval Office?
Well, it's a little surreal. We all have an image of the Oval Office, and I can tell you that Hollywood has reproduced it rather faithfully. What you see in the movies is pretty close to how it looks. It's a little more brightly lit than most people would anticipate, but you can sit in a chair and you can look out the windows at the Rose Garden and you can look around the walls at the portraits of the founding father presidents. I can see how it is very intimidating if you are a foreign head of state to sit in that office and negotiate something with the President of the United States. But it is ornate and it is steeped in history, and you are aware that you are someplace special when you're there.
I mean, this has been a whirlwind trip, so what would you take away from it?
Well, obviously, meeting the President of the United States. I was not alone. This was a group of 10 people. We were all from various markets around the country. We all do news. Most of it do political news. We were there in an off-the-record meeting that lasted about 30 minutes with the President. I wish I could tell you a lot of the things that he said, but there was an agreement that we could not. We had to leave our cell phones outside the room, so we didn't get any pictures. We understand there will be pictures later sent to us by the White House photographer. I can tell you that the discussion with Mr. Trump was cordial. He greeted all of us, seemed to know our names, so he was well prepped, and talked about things of interest to him and importance to him. There was coverage of national and international issues. There was also an opportunity to ask questions, and there was discussion of more localized and regional issues.
Any big things from Missouri?
Any big things from the meeting with the President for Missouri? Gee, I wish I could say. pay attention in the months going forward leading up to the election. That's all I'll say. I did speak with Kellyanne Conway after the meeting and asked her if the President of the United States would be returning to Missouri in the same frequency perhaps that he has already been there, with the focus on the McCaskill, presumptively Hawley election coming up, and she just smiled and said, I think you already know the answer to that. So pay attention going forward in Missouri.
Well, while Kermit was in Washington, he also spoke with Senator Claire McCaskill and Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler.
Both serve on the Armed Services Committee in their respective bodies. Here's what they each had to say about North Korea.
I want the president to succeed at this. It would be terrific if we could get the threat of nuclear weapons out of North Korea. Because now we're going to have to deal, in all likelihood, with the threat of nuclear weapons in Iran, because the president has pulled out of the Iran agreement, and now I believe they are going to feel like they can go ahead and march towards a nuclear weapon. And Pakistan has a nuclear weapon, and they are not a reliable ally at this point. It's a dangerous neighborhood. It would be terrific for the president to succeed at this, and I wish him the very best, but I think it's treacherous.
The strong alliance that we have with South Korea and Japan has really helped in this. I've been encouraged that China has been willing to come on board, and I'm expecting good things at this upcoming summit.
Do you think it's going to happen? There's some indication now that Kim is finding reasons not to have it happen. Do you think it will?
I think it will happen. He has committed to doing so. He's already taken steps to dismantle his nuclear test site, and it's to his own benefit to come up with some positive solutions there on the peninsula.
Well, you may have noticed the guy that normally sits next to me, my co-anchor Kermit Miller, he's been missing from the KRCG 13 studios for the past couple of days. He's been reporting from the nation's capital and spoke with the lawmakers that represent mid-Missouri on a number of topics. He tells us about his visit.
This thing came together really, really fast. We learned about it on Friday. By Saturday, we were in a car driving 14 hours to Washington, D.C., got in Sunday evening, and decided to do some work before we went to the White House that involved interviews with 4 members of the Missouri congressional delegation in 2 days. Then we end up at the White House, and we were here for the White House press briefing by Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the day that President Moon of South Korea had met with President Trump, and then I went into the Oval Office with a group of people. We were all from various markets around the country. We all do news, most of it do political news. We were there in an off-the-record meeting that lasted about 30 minutes. I did speak with Kellyanne Conway after the meeting and asked her if the President of the United States would be returning to Missouri in the same frequency perhaps that he has already been there, with the focus on the McCaskill, presumptively Hawley election coming up, and she just smiled and said, I think you already know the answer to that. So pay attention going forward in Missouri.